Well, hello, good afternoon. Welcome everyone to Data Privacy Day, a conversation with Donna Kidwell. I hope you've all had a wonderful day and you've brought your favorite snack to what's going to be an informal and informative conversation. My name is Samantha Becker, and I am the University Technology Office's Executive Director for Creative and Communications. And the team that I serve gets to do fun things like events like this all the time. So if you like what you hear today, make sure to check out our events calendar at uto.asu.edu/events. And if you enjoyed the privacy themed playlist that we rolled out with you all coming in, make sure to stick around at the very end because we're going to be playing some of Donna's favorite other privacy themed songs. So we have a lot of fun planned today. But of course, the host of the hour is Donna Kidwell, ASU's new Chief Information Security and Digital Trust Officer. Digital trust is only growing in importance and emphasis around the world. It encompasses a lot of different areas and represents, the confluence of cybersecurity, information security, learner empowerment. And I know Donna and friends are about to do some greater defining here for all of us today. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to a special guest, our CIO, Lev Gonick, to say a few words and introduce the woman of the hour, Donna Kidwell. Thanks, Lev.
Afternoon, everybody. Great to see you all up on the screen here. Very much want to welcome you to our first Data Privacy Day conversation and a chance of somewhat of a coming out party for Donna Kidwell, ASU's new Chief Information Security and Digital Trust Officer. As Samantha just shared with you, certainly it's our view, both at ASU and certainly in the University Technology Office, that important topics like privacy and security need to actually be engaged with by design. And when we began looking for a leader who could actually evolve our thinking into work that was, in fact, conceptually, as well as in terms of the detail of putting together operational plans around the whole topic of, again, data security and data privacy by design, it wasn't that complicated for me when I looked across not only the ASU community, but actually the community as a whole across the United States. I was, in small measure, responsible for recruiting Donna to ASU about 2.5 years ago from University of Texas at Austin and the UT system. At the time, I helped to engage her to help lead one of ASU's most important technology and programs over at Ed Plus, the first CTO for Ed Plus. And for those of you who don't know Donna, not only is she an outstanding technology leader, she is also, and I don't say this lightly, very much a Renaissance human. She very much thinks broadly about issues. She thinks about aesthetics. She thinks about need. She thinks about quality. She thinks a lot about ethical frameworks, inclusion, diversity, and all of the issues that need to be thought through because the topic at hand is so much more important than to be left to technologists alone. And so we in the technology community are thrilled to have Donna join UTO as our first university-wide individual leader who holds both the CISO role as well as what is, I think, first perhaps in the entire country, a university leader committed to and responsible for all of the work that we do around digital trust. And with that, I give you Donna Kidwell.
Thanks, Lev. Hello, everybody. What an amazing crowd. Oh my goodness. As the admits come in, my heart swells a little bit just seeing some of you guys come in. This is fantastic. Welcome. Happy Thursday. It's a real joy to be able to see you all and to have an hour and a half or a couple hours where we can just chat about privacy and what it means to you. I want to keep today's discussion Not terribly technical, although there are quite a lot of technical folks on this Zoom today, and we could certainly dive into those conversations if you want. But I'd really love the time to be talking to you and hearing from you what you think of in terms of the most important elements of privacy as they face us today, culturally where we're at, and how we navigate an increasingly complex and really extraordinary moment in time, I think, for everyone who's here to actually be shaping the culture where privacy goes. We don't have a lot of time with my fellow colleague, Diana Bowman, but would you mind, Sam, if I hand it over to you to do a quick little intro with Di, and then let's go roll right into that.
I would love to. I'm so pleased that Diana or Di is able to join us today, fresh off the digital slopes from just a few weeks ago, completing our first ever Shaping EDU Winter Games, which brought together smart city leaders with education futurists and the like to envision a better life and a better world. Di is coming to us from the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law as the Associate Dean, and Diana wears many other hats in addition to that. So Di, thank you so much for being here, representing the technology and the public interest perspective, the policy making and lawmaking perspective, and really so many other perspectives. So welcome.
Thank you. It's my absolute pleasure to be here. Lev, thank you for your leadership. Generally across the university, but bringing Donna in. And the only thing I'd like to say in terms of Donna and her credentials, she also has the best shoe collection of anybody I know. And that's a pretty impressive feat and one that needs to be acknowledged.
Well, I appreciate that. Takes one to know one there, Diana. But yeah. What a delightful way to spend, we've got about 25 minutes with you.
You do. I have to apologize. I have a 6-year-old who likes to be picked up from school at a reasonable time. So my apologies that I cannot spend the whole time with you all.
No, not at all. As Di and I are talking, feel free to start asking questions in the chat. We have a team that's moderating that so that we can be both talking to you and they can be giving us a heads up on things that you're interested in. So don't be shy about starting the conversation, and we'll just keep the ball rolling. Diana, I was thinking a lot about all the different kinds of work that you do and all the different places we could start the conversation. And health might be a fun place to start, considering where we are right now and some of the challenges ahead of us. What do you think? We could start there.
I think that's a great place to start, because I did see Chris Richardson on this poll, and it just made me think about what ASU did over the summer with their ASU app in order to return the campus safely and carefully back into the academic environment. And I think ASU showed real leadership in terms of both the technology application, but I had the privilege of sitting on a university-wide committee to think about the ethical and legal dimensions of rolling out that app. So bring on the health discussion, I say.
Well, and that's a cue for everybody here joining us. If you have questions specifically about that, go ahead and post them and let's get going. That discussion was a really good one. Let's take us back. And Chris, since we know you're here, we might call on you too. But let's take us back to last summer. We weren't as deep into the scenario as we're in now, so we were learning a tremendous amount. I don't think anybody had a really good forecast of what the fall would bring and what our students were going to do. So we had lots of questions about how best to even communicate with them and who we would be communicating with. As you think about that particular steering group, one of the things that I thought was really interesting were just all the different voices on it. I'm trying to think back of everybody who was there. We had epidemiologists there. We had modelers there. We had folks that represented student health. Who am I missing? It was really neat collection. I think it was Bobby Gray, who may also be here, that was kind of shepherding us through that whole, but just the voices they collected to have the discussion about what to do, I thought was just great.
What I really appreciated about that process, one, was the energy and the enthusiasm that everybody brought to that committee. And I remember being on calls every single afternoon, and Bobby was just the most enthusiastic person, despite obviously having directives coming down from the leadership that changed our mission each and every day. But the respect that was given to everybody's voice in the room, and I know I was a pain in the ass on a number of times saying, no, we can't do that, or I don't think that's right. But we worked through a really challenging situation with utmost respect and came out with a really quality product that I think has credibility and legitimacy, and that you are seeing our students, faculty, and staff engaging with. And I think in terms of what we've seen in a university in the US and globally, I don't think there has been a better process or a better product that has allowed us to do what we want to do, and that's to educate students and to actually engage in cutting edge research. And we did it on campus with ourselves.
Yeah, really walking the talk in that. I remember another round of those conversations was really in terms of who was going to be logging into the app. We weren't even entirely sure which populations and which stakeholders were going to be the ones using the app. Discussions about whether or not ASU Online students, campus students, vendors that might be on the campus. There was a lot of discussion about who and what the intention was with those individuals.
Absolutely. And then you factor in all of our international students, some of whom got actually tracked wherever they were at the time. We have the Thunderbird hubs around the world, and I mean, they are staff and colleagues, and what level of care do we need to show for them? And the idea of what do we do with that data after 14 days, and making sure that the policies were very clear to everybody who was going to be needing to be using that application. And I sit in a law school, and I can assure you that as this started to roll out, the number of students who came to me because this is their world and they are, frightfully careful when it comes to their privacy and security. And to be able to say that the University Technology Office reached out to the law school and actually had a faculty member engage in the process actually provided them with an assurance that we had worked through this. I mean, I could have said OGC, and OGC were clearly involved, but it was interesting that as soon as they saw that faculty had also been engaged, people who actually work on this and do research and engage with the community, we actually address a number of those issues internally. And I know Eddie Garcia, who I work with here in the law school, knows this firsthand because I think he had probably some of those students coming to him as well.
And that's a conversation that's kept on to this date. Just recently, the app started asking about whether or not you were quarantined. I know that Sam Becker and the entire team has been really listening. So as the situation evolves, as the app evolves, as our policy needs to adapt, there's been, and I think it's really wonderful to watch just how people engage in that conversation, and then how quickly we can respond as we get feedback.
I mean, this is a situation where, and the word has been overused, and I'm sure everybody's sick of it, but we have had to pivot, and every day is changing in terms of whether it's CDC guidance, whether it's from the state, the county, what we know. And I think it's really important to point out, I mean, many of these decisions have been guided by the data that we're actually generating through biodesign, and Josh LeBaire and his team, the information that we can feed in from what they have been doing on the ground in testing, and then actually maneuver ourselves to respond is just phenomenal. And you think about the resources of a university the size of ASU, and you think about then the size of a university like ASU, and to see it so nimble and be able to be so flexible and to integrate these multiple data sets into something like the app. I mean, I'm sitting in my office in the law school. I have been in person, I think, since June. And I believe the only reasons that I've been able to do that is because of the combination of the testing and then the app.
So that's a great example that, and I think challenge for us too, right? That the more data we collect, the better we can be stewards of how we're responding and how we're helping out our community navigating through extraordinary circumstances like this. But I appreciate Jesse Defer mentioned in the chat here. It's a little unsettling to have this kind of data. And in fact, as we get into vaccines, not just ASU, but the community at large, all of our communities are kind of faced with, okay, what data do we need to be taking? How do we make sense of that data? Thinking back, both at COVID data, like early days, just even trying to interpret some of the infographics and different sites and I don't know, data gurus on Twitter, trying to make heads or tails out of what we were learning. It gets really complicated. So I think that unsettling comment, and Jesse, I hope you don't mind my picking up on it, that's an important element of trust.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. And I remember some of our very early conversations is, would it be better to have a private sector vendor come in and actually work with us on the app? And if I recall correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, we saw very quickly that that issue of the data, how long is it stored, how could it be used, was going to be fundamental to the success of what we were trying to do. And by being able to keep it in-house and be very clear to our stakeholders, and by that I mean everybody from our students to the faculty and staff, to say that this would be kept for a very limited period of time, used only in this application, and then would be scrubbed as soon as it was no longer needed, which was after a very short time period, was a very different conversation than if we were working with a private sector party. And because it was a very clear purpose for what we were collecting the data for, and that was the return, the safe and healthy return to campus, I think that I don't think it necessarily addressed it for all people, but I do think it was a very different conversation than what we would have had if we were partnering with a multinational company that we know has rolled out these apps in a number of jurisdictions and is either selling data or using it for ways that people never intended it to be used.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think we've got a few more minutes, so I might use that to turn the conversation a little bit more to trust. You bring up a really good point there. When we talk about data privacy, there's one thing, what data am I disclosing? How much autonomy do I have? How much do I even know what data is being collected on me? And another thing around whether or not that institution is thinking about what they're doing and what transparency I have into what third parties they may have, that kind of thing. That makes this trust conversation even harder.
Absolutely. And then you start to layer in culture, jurisdiction, trusting government more generally, not even just in terms of data and security and privacy. I mean, I've been looking at obviously things like data dashboards, electronic medical records around the world in terms of how that has enabled countries to respond. And you take a country such as Australia, universal healthcare, highly integrated healthcare system because it is funded by the federal government, quite advanced electronic medical records, and a country that has a very much a population health focused as opposed to an individual health focus. And so it is clear that there is a higher level of trust in terms of very sensitive data being put into the hands of government to make pretty hard policy decisions because there is seen as a benefit to all in doing so. And that level of, I'm an Australian, so I can call it a nanny state because clearly this has been a great example of it being a nanny state. But that level of trust doesn't exist here in the United States. And so there's many things that could not be done, and definitely at the speed at which they were done here, because that trust does not exist generally, and then specifically when we come to things like health data.
That's a great point. I worked for about 4 years living in Texas, but spending 3 or 4 months a year in Korea. And so I have lots of colleagues in Korea, and it was remarkable to compare our experience, which we did pretty regularly because we were all, very concerned about it. And Seoul is a very, very tight and very crowded city in a lot of ways. So it was remarkable just to share with my peers there how different our responses were. Of course, one of the very first things I learned about working in Korea is they They already have a culture where it's okay to wear masks. If you feel at all like you might be sick, you wear a mask so that you can protect others. It took me a couple trips to Korea to learn that, but there was already an underlying fabric of consideration for one another that was a different response.
And they also had the experience of SARS nearly 20 years ago. And they actually created a reporting system in response to SARS. And some of those jurisdictions actually still have got that data in hand because of the potential long-term consequences of SARS. And so there is also that culture of the government at large having significant data about individuals and populations more generally as it pertains to viruses such as this. So there wasn't necessarily even the suspicion that may have actually occurred in other jurisdictions who hadn't actually already fought something like SARS.
Yeah, Diana, looking back at this experience, are there things that you think we might think about, lessons learned going into trying to build trust quicker into experiences like this? You know, and especially knowing that we've got a lot of university and technologists that are here that in one way or another have an opportunity to potentially shape the work that they do. You know, what would you think are some things that come to mind, lessons we might do better if we get a second round?
One of the things that I think we do very well, and I say the University Technology Office here as we, is so often in universities, the UTO is just behind the scenes and we don't think of them, we don't engage with them, and there's not the partnerships. It's really clear that UTO is central to everything that we do here at ASU, and the visibility that you've created in terms of events, partnerships, these type of dialogues, I think really has refocused how we do think about trust within the university. And the more that the UTO is out there and has this public face, the more that I think the stakeholders will want to engage with the UTO, but actually understand the role that you're playing, not only in delivering phenomenal service, but also safeguarding their privacy and security. And that takes a long time, and it does take leadership, both in terms of UTO and ASU. And I think where there's probably still a little margin to move is around with the student voice. I mean, that's really hard because we have, 85,000 students. They see the UTO and they see the services you deliver, but engaging them in the conversation, engaging them in some of the decision-making, or at least having their voice as part of the decision-making, especially as it pertains to their experience on campus, I think is probably kind of the next step. But the UTO really has done such a phenomenal job in all of this. And I mean, we really should be thanking you and I mean, the whole team in terms of what you did for us.
Well, it's, I appreciate that. And I'm really pausing a little moment to reflect. Like one of the things that you mentioned there, it takes time. And these conversations take time, building the right, even knowing like, where do I go with the question that I have? And then discovering, oh, well, I got an answer there, but the answer will be richer if I include this. You know, that element towards building what then becomes digital trust inside of, say, the app is real intentional, very much outreach, very much trying to be open and vulnerable. There's a lot to unpack there.
It does not happen overnight, that's for sure. And I mean, relationships are so key. One of the things I have really appreciated with the work that I do in the law school, but also my general engagement across ASU and with the community, is that anybody I approach in the UTO, whether it's yourself, Bobby, Lev, Chris, are always open to have that conversation. And my ability to break down barriers and get answers quickly enables me to have more credibility in the stakeholders that I work with and the students I serve. And I also think about our colleagues in Global Security Initiative who are also working on this in a different perspective. They are out there engaging with the university at large. And Jamie Winterton, who is an international expert on this, will be the first one to pick up a call if I have a student or somebody out in the community who wants answers in terms of what ASU is doing.
No, Diana, we have to let you go. But maybe before, the next conversation we're going to have is really going to start focusing on definitions around digital trust and how privacy and trust relate to one another. So any parting thoughts on that before we let you go?
I think I have lots to learn on that front. I claim no expertise, but what I do know is everybody has a different definition and a different baseline. And it really is interesting to open up those conversations because your background, your experiences, and your educational kind of framing are so relevant to where you land in terms of definitions and thinking about this. And as I said, layer in the international perspective, and good luck with coming up with some core beliefs and understanding. But these are the conversations we have to have. And as you say, they're tough and they expose vulnerabilities. But to move forward and actually ensure that we are doing the right thing, we need to have those really tough and challenging conversations.
Well, thank you so much for having this one with us. I so appreciate it. I think the colleagues in our chat, I've seen a few appreciations there too. Thanks, Diana.
Thank you so much for having me, Donna. Congratulations on this role. You are going to kick butt in terms of your role. And I think I can speak for the whole law school, including Eddie, who's here, that anything that we can do to support you and your mission and the UTO more generally, consider us signed up and ready to assist.
Oh, be careful what you ask for, Diana and Eddie.
I have never recruited such an offer with the UTO so far. I love working with this team and it's an incredibly exciting adventure.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. And I'm sorry that I cannot stay for the rest of this call.
Bye, Diana. So, Sam.
Hey.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say really thought-provoking conversation. Thank you so much, Donna.
I was watching the Slacks, or rather chats, as we were talking, and I have to confess I didn't really get a chance to do much more than catch out of the side of my eye. Do you have any reflections before we go to, because we're going to do a Q&A section, but is there anything that we should address right now as we're leaving the conversation with Diana?
Yes, and I know this may seem, part of the basic building blocks, but I know there are people with different definitions of digital trust floating out there. So just moving forward, before we get into audience questions and before we delve into some of our breakout sessions where we kind of talk about what we'd like to see at ASU in terms of data privacy, how would you personally define, what's your elevator pitch for digital trust?
I love that you asked that, and it is challenging because I think what we've done here is taken a word that's really precious, trust, and then framed it inside of digital experiences. And those are so ubiquitous in what we do. So in some ways, it's easier to describe digital trust from the frameworks of all the different places where the conversation happens. So it happens inside of privacy, it happens inside of compliance, it happens inside of security, it happens inside of product design, it happens inside of interface design, it happens inside of how you decide whether or not you're having the right marketing conversations at the right time. Like very suddenly, it's a thread that gets woven across an awful lot of what we do. So it almost becomes untenable there. In terms of practicalities, there is a reason why the traditional CISO role is a really good home for it, because that's the place where when soup comes to nuts, and many of you guys have done security reviews, sorry to have to mention them, team. But yeah, I see, Scott, I saw that smile. But right, as you're in the throes of those security reviews, what you're really thinking about is what's the heart of the relationship I'm about to sign this contract to? What data is going to go back and forth about the people I really care about and the stakeholders engaged? Like that's a moment where we can think about trust. So very comfortable for a CISO. Compliance, regulation, privacy, privacy statements. That's a moment where you actually get to build trust. So, while we're, and in the spirit of full transparency, I think ASU has an opportunity to define across our community and frankly, higher ed, how do we want to define it? How do we want to pull together as an organizational community and do so. To that end, Erin, we've got a little exercise on Slido, and let's break open this digital trust conversation with this.
Okay, so if you're new to Slido, this is something that we've been getting really into lately. You just go to the link on the screen, either directly to slido.com or using the link on the screen. And then no need to subscribe. You just need to enter that code that you see there, and you should be able to get right in. I see Erin has pasted a direct link in the chat, even faster. And Donna will be polling us, just as we've been polling her with some questions. She's going to be pulling us. So what do you got for us, Donna?
Well, let's go ahead and step in. And just based on that basic definition that I gave, I'd love to hear what words come to mind as you hear digital trust. And keep those rolling. And I'm going to take a look at some of the things that are here in the chat. Take a couple of the words that are coming in. If you type a word that's already there, you'll see that it gets bigger in the word cloud. So security is a big piece of digital trust. We're seeing lots of that one. Privacy, yes. Oxymoron, okay, that's good. We should drill into that a little bit. Can you have them both? Are they mutually exclusive? Wait a second, guys. Oh, verifiable. I like that one. I like that one. Keep rolling. 152 people on this Zoom. I'm not going to let us sit at 66 responses. Come on. Surveillance. Smoke and mirrors. Crowd. Oh. A branding opportunity. Okay, that's interesting. Let's come back to that one. Scary robots. Okay.
Donna, do you mind if I share what comes to mind when I hear digital trust too? Just like
jump in
on your definition.
Please do.
Okay, so I'm a new Sun Devil. Hey, and I hope to be one day. I hope to attend grad school here one day. And I'm thinking about, everything I'm about to learn, all the new skills. And my goal, embarking on this journey at ASU ultimately is to be employable and get the job of my dreams, say with a major technology company. Just having sort of the trust that I will be able to somehow own what I've learned and showcase what I've learned and make crucial decisions about who gets to see that information and how I display it. Really tells an even more illustrious vision than a transcript or even a digital portfolio loan could tell. And I think it takes digital trust, or digital trust is the key piece of that. It's about that relationship with the learner ultimately, and them trusting that they are in control of their own destiny.
I love that. Do you mind if I play around with that idea a little bit?
Please do.
Let's pull back to your moments of thinking that you might be a Sun Devil. So, and we have an extraordinary, and many people here are over at Ed Plus. Hello, Ashok. I'm thinking of you. Who's day-to-day working. Hi, Ashok. Day-to-day working to make incredible magic happen with Salesforce, which is a customer relationship management system. I would imagine Phil Kamarny's here, VP of Innovation at Salesforce. I would imagine that I'm in hundreds of Salesforce orgs across the country and don't even know it. I don't even know that that's the tool that I'm in. But some point in your journey, you ask for more information about the program you're interested in. And at that moment, we have a record of you. We know something about you. We know what you are interested in. That then builds on more and more that we learn about you. Frankly, we've got really incredible abilities because Google and other companies like them have created some pretty fantastic marketing technology behind it, where I not only know what you've disclosed, but I may know ancillary information around that about you. At some point, we're now in conversation. You're talking maybe to enrollment advisors about what this experience looks like. We're passing information to you about what opportunities are available to you. Each of these little interactions, all mediated by the experience you're having on your phone, whatever comes into your email box, the next page you see on the web, every single little piece is either creating a space where you trust us more, or creating a space where you're like, nah, maybe that felt a little funky. I just told them this information over here, and now they don't know who I am over here. Like, you can start seeing the disconnects in an organization, especially one as complicated as us, or you can start seeing the harmony across the organization. You can start experiencing how much we actually are paying attention to who you are and being respectful of that. So here, you're not even a Sun Devil yet, and we already have a sense about who you are. Then let's say that you're a freshman. Maybe you don't go through that particular process, but you apply because you've known since you were a sophomore in high school. The first thing that you do when you apply is like give over all the financial data that you have and that your parents have, every high school record that's available to you, pretty much everything that's even remotely a data footprint. Eventually, you're going to give us your immunization records. Students give us that, and one of the very first transference of really interesting information about them, for the most part, without even thinking about it. I never thought about it. I was after the goal. I wanted a history degree. I couldn't wait to get into the libraries and start exploring what all the campus had available to me. That's all I thought about. I didn't think about how incredible the information, say, that you could on a FAFSA. Never stopped to pause to think about that. So just in what you've described there, that very first front end of the learning journey, that's a tremendous amount of trust that's implied. It's a kind of faith. It's a kind of promise that we're making early on. And then from there on, I think one of the questions, am I mistaken, was about Canvas data. Do you recall, Sam?
I'm looking for it. I didn't see that one specifically, but feel free to spin off it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I could have made that up. Or whoever posted it could post it again, or just speak up.
Does Canvas collect personal data? Are students made aware of this? Are they able to opt out?
Oh, that's a really great question. So most of the personal data that we know about you long before you get into Canvas. You're already accepting those terms before you get in. What's really happening in Canvas is your learning experience and things that you're doing as a learner. And we've had now, a pretty strong, over a decade of really incredible learning analytics. Their entire communities and standards based around the analytics and data that would pass between Canvas into other systems to help us understand what's really, where there really is efficacy and where learners are really learning. The Caliper data standard, I don't know if any of our data folks are here who are really familiar with that. I'm on the board of an organization called IMS Global. They're charged and stewards of that standard along with badges. There's a tremendous amount of really extraordinary technology that we've got to build on to be able to make sense of that. Carolee, I think what I heard there was, do the students know? Now, I don't know how aware they are of it. You sign, of course, as you're going through here, and in many, many spaces, you check that box that says, yep, I agree. Cookies, I love cookies. Cookies are great. How harmful could a cookie be? All those acceptances happen. That doesn't mean that we're quite as cognizant of how much is really there.
Hey, thanks. I know we also have some breakouts to get to, and you've got 2 more questions for us to really be thinking about. So we've got definitely an interesting word cloud here firming up. What do you got for us next, Donna?
Oh, well, let's take a look at this word cloud a little bit. There was a lot of, and I'm pleasantly surprised to see a lot of questions around oxymoron. So I don't see in the chat, this is supposed to be a conversation, guys. But I'd love to hear more about what and unpack it means to have an oxymoron. I'm going to take that and assume that part of the challenge here is that you can't trust anything digital. Is that a bit of it? Something in the chat? I know, it's Thursday afternoon.
I think in this digital trust scenario, we're taking advantage of the fact that the word cloud submission is anonymous, whereas the chat is.
That's true. And in fact, since none of us actually had to log into Slido, it is one of the more anonymous tools that we could have. Other tools might look anonymous and aren't really.
Donna, I think we might be able to summarize some of the chats that have been going on as an interest
Sure.
in deeper visibility into how what data is actually being saved or stored, and visibility into how that may be used. So maybe a deeper visibility into the use of the data at that point of consent.
Oh, that's a great point. You know, I'd welcome, and this doesn't have to be a conversation for now, but you all know how to find me. So either on Twitter, or shoot me an email or a Slack if you're inside of our ASU or Shaping EDU communities. But I'd be really curious to hear where you find really good experiences. One of the things that is relatively new and largely a response to GDPR and to states like California thinking more deeply about privacy are better and more robust mechanisms for consent. So my favorite ones are those where you get that moment, data is going to start moving, I'm going to start collecting data as the owner of this experience. And so you get something that says, do you consent? And some of them will actually let you go in deeper and see what you're consenting to, or opt out of things that you don't want to consent to. So you can say, nope, I really don't need you to reach out to me about marketing, but I'm really interested in research, or whatever it is that's interesting to you that they're trying to provide as value. There are a couple things that I really like about that. One, it forces a conversation from the person who's actually running and designing that to think through what are those different reasons that we'd be taking data, and how do I make that something that you can, as a learner or a user, actually anticipate and understand. While we're on that, could I ask, we'll slip out of the word cloud real quick and go to the I agree slide.
I think that might explain it right there.
Uh-huh. So we're going to show you an art installation from a few years back by an artist named Dima, just really, really brilliant and very effective mechanism. And then an infographic. I think that I've linked that infographic in the deck. And so maybe we could pop it in the slide so that folks could actually go and scroll through. The infographic was inspired by Dima's I Agree installation. But Dima essentially took on 8.5 by 11 pieces of paper. Some of my Ed Plus friends have seen this because I think it's very effective, and I fell in love with it when I first found it. Phil Komarny, I think, has talked to me about this too. They took and they printed out these terms of service. And some of these are 2,000, 3,000, 7,000, 16,000 words long. They would take you, an hour to read them all, and they're written for legal purposes. I've talked to attorneys about this very graphic, and the response I got was, oh, well, that big long pink one is probably the best of the legal documents. Like, that's not helpful because nobody's going to read them. I do try to read all of them and have gotten better at being able to scan through and look for things that are strange in them. Little bit too small a screen for me to be able to see a show of hands of any gamers that we have, but there's a first-person shooter that I'm really abysmal at called Valorant out there, and they've got a terms of service by their parent company where inside the terms of service are essentially little Easter eggs. If a gamer were to go to read those, they would see these little things that were only meaningful to that community. They're pretty snarky, they're a little funny. It's brilliant because it does, if you are interested, give you a reason to engage in a document that's this horrible. But frankly, that is trying to declare to you what information is being tracked and how they're handling it as inconsumable as it is. Hey, Jeremy, I see Oxymoron speaks to the point that despite best intentions of everyone involved in trust, it takes something like SolarWinds to bring it all down. Yeah, and how quickly did that happen? Those of us who spend our days watching this thing. You know, it was maybe right before lunch on Sunday, a few little mirrors and little echoes of the stuff happening the week before with FireEye. It kind of made us go, huh, probably need to watch that. By Sunday evening, maybe 5 or 6 hours later, just traffic on the internet, just generally in the places where security folks tend to hang out. Most of us had already mobilized teams. It moved fast. And then we're still trying to really interpret and understand how big a supply chain threat attack this was. And something that was in place, you know, for at the very least 9 months, but maybe as long as 13 months before. There is some really interesting, Jeremy, brand marketing materials that have been studies done that try to demonstrate how much work a brand has to use, the kinds of revenue and the kinds of sophistication and maturity a brand has to have to build trust. And yet you can destroy trust on Twitter within a couple hours. The price of being able to get that back is extraordinarily difficult. And in SolarWinds' case, you can see they've hired specifically people to try to help them, known people in the community to try to help them rebuild that and to garner the trust back. But it is so much harder once you've lost it. Yeah.
Thank you, Donna.
No, absolutely. So shall we do some breakouts? How are we doing on time, Sam?
You know, we have plenty of time. We had some free open mic time baked in at the end. So we're a little bit over on this segment, but no problem.
Okay. Are there good questions we should address here? Because I have to confess, I can't read the walls of text. But we're recording them so I can read them later.
There's been a lot of comments and a lot of back and forth, but I'll go over to Carolee, John, and Aaron to see if they've mined any.
Yeah, so there's one question about cookie collection for ASU. Do we start collecting cookies before we even allow people to read the privacy statement?
Oh, that's a very good question. Yeah, so there's, I don't want to get technically into how they phrased that, but Google Analytics, Google Tag Management, there are things that as that page is loading, we're starting to learn about somebody. Later, if the group is interested, we can talk a little bit about some of the tools that I use that thwart cookie management. I would expect some of my other colleagues here from UTO use tools like that too. But yeah, you can pretty readily see when any site is starting to collect that information. And ASU is using Google Tag Management and Google Analytics, but we are very thoughtful about that privacy statement and about how we're leveraging that data. One of the things when Lev started talking to me about this role and understanding the sophistication that all of the technology groups on campus were getting made me really think, yes, this is a perfect time for us to engage very intentionally in the conversation is just that. We can unintentionally, and teams can get into a place where they're able to see things that they may not even be using, but that doesn't mean that that capability is not there. So it's, I don't know that that's the best technical answer. We can kind of take that online if they want to shoot me an email or a Slack. But I think the spirit of it would really be how quickly and how intentionally are we trying to be respectful for what we collect. It's also worth knowing that client-side experiences don't necessarily tell me who you are. So one of these things in terms of building trust and building the data exhaust, the kind of footprint that you have, you're not actually revealing who you are until you reveal who you are. The kind of work, it's not impossible, but the kind of artificial intelligence it would take to stitch together an identity without tools designed to stitch together an identity aren't ones that we would ever use. Is that possible? Could others be doing that? Yeah, if you go to Facebook and you wade through all the different settings that you can have, somewhere deeply nested in that, you'll actually find brands that are giving Facebook data about you and they're kind of doing a handshake there. That's interesting. So does that kind of thing happen? Absolutely. Are we doing that level of sophistication now? No.
And there's a comment that choosing who you trust is one thing, but it seems like we're no longer able to do that because it's now just it's not just two parties, it's a whole chain of trust. And I think that's a really great point. When you're giving your data to a company, it's not one person, it's many.
Yeah, that is why we put, and Scott, I'm thinking of you again, but that is why we put so much emphasis and frankly, real man hours on the part of both the units and UTO towards things like security reviews, because the promise that we're making is being extended to anybody we bring into that environment. So a faculty member discovers a really fantastic and engaging tool that they want to use. Ruby's team and getting that into Canvas will be real work, but we do it with great intention. And we really do look across that chain and make sure that we're making a commitment to you that we can back up through our vendors too. And if we don't, we're mindful about what that risk is and about, you know, whether or not what we're doing is in the spirit and keeping our commitment and our mission to the learners or not, which can be kind of disappointing, right? You find an incredible tool and we're like, we like this tool, but the kinds of things that you'd have to do to mitigate it don't make it worth the risk. That's a terrible conversation to have. With any luck, we're having those conversations early, like this one, and trying to explore that together. You know, just to build on that a little bit, we're also in a really unique position at ASU. So we have had vendors where Lev has actually worked with them to get them in a place where our trust capabilities would be higher. And we do things like Scale U. We have companies that actually participate with ASU investing in them to help them get where they want to be. All of those are opportunities for us to essentially do a kind of collaborative product design. We worked for a couple of years with Salesforce on product design around trust issues. So ASU is not afraid to actually work directly with those vendors that we're passing that trust to kind of figure out this stuff together.
Hey, thanks, Donna.
You bet, Sam.
Before we jump into breakouts, and I actually think this is a good way to progress, I know you may have a couple other questions for us, and then perhaps we can break out into some deeper conversations with each other, and then end in kind of a group, in the group coming back together and sharing out. Does that sound good to you?
That does.
Okay, awesome. Took a risk, went with it. It's going to work. Shall we pull the, are there any more Slido questions that you had?
If they become interesting, we will go back to them.
Okay.
Erin and I have a plan.
Awesome. Okay.
But I think maybe before the slide was some kind of grounding questions to go into the breakout with. Kind of a gray slide. There we go.
Woohoo! As well as a link for how to get there and record some of your thoughts here. We can't be in every single conversation. We wish we could, but perhaps digital trust doesn't permit that just yet on some level. And so it's not like you have to write everything down that you talk about in your group discussions, but maybe the highlights and some key outcomes. Not only for you to share your digital trust story and any personal encounters or perspectives, but we've heard from Donna and folks in the chat even on some of the most timely needs around data privacy. I could imagine entire subsets of spin-offs from this conversation based on things like social media and Google Analytics. So what are some of the most timely needs? We want to hear from you and want you to share and discuss with each other. And then what would you like to see ASU to do to bolster digital trust? This is just the start of the conversation. And as Lev put it, Donna's coming out, but I think you're going to start to see a lot more digital trust community engagement activities over the next months, a year or so. So what would you like to see from those activities? What would you like to see ASU do in general towards building greater digital trust with the community? So there is a short link, links.asu.edu/privacy, please. And we're going to have, gosh, there's just over 100 of us. So we're probably going to have about 10, little more than 10 breakouts. So Erin, I'll invite you to break us out, then we'll all come back together and do a quick sharing out. And
Sam, how much time will we spend in the breakouts?
We had envisioned 20 minutes previously, but how's everyone feeling about that?
Maybe 15, so we have time to talk when we come back.
Yeah.
Perfect. 15 sounds like a good
I
compromise.
think Eddie was saying 11.
11 minutes? Okay, perfect.
6
So
minutes, he was saying.
Okay.
He's fended us off. No, I think that's a great suggestion. Let's go. Welcome back, everybody.
Okay, I think this is the crew. Okay, so I've been watching this breakout, Doc, Donna, start to unfold. There's been a lot of movement and traction within some of these groups. So
Okay, great.
How do you feel about kind of hearing from the ASU and UTO? I know I see a lot of UTO folks here, but though I know this is a lot of folks from across ASU. Do you say we delve into some of their highlights and kind of hear the most
I would love that.
needs and desires? Awesome. Okay.
I would love that, because I know we've got, all sorts of folks from ASU. We've got some friends and family. We have students like Augustine. So yeah, let's share with me what we know from the breakouts.
Okay, perfect. Let's go over to breakout group 2 first.
Yeah.
That's Scott, Laura, and Robert. Does any of you 3 want to represent any of your conversation?
No, it was a private conversation.
No, well, I trust that. Laura, I see hand up. Go for it.
Okay, I got a few laughs out of that. Thank you, Jen. I appreciate my corny joke.
Well, we had a kind of our conversation, and colleagues, please jump in if I don't want to misrepresent. We didn't have who's going to be the designated representative. So I am technically speaking without formally earning the trust of my colleagues. So I do want to, in the true sense of disclosure, share with everyone that I'm just volunteering. But we talked a little in the first. So I will say we had a really good conversation and did a terrible job of taking notes. So apologies there, because we actually had a good conversation, but we talked about, as far as data privacy goes, we did talk a lot about the impact of the deployed workforce now. Like, do we leave our computers running? Do we lock our computers when we get up? Like all the things you learn in information security training. Have we kind of let that slide because many people are at home or in their non-traditional place? Will we bring those bad habits back to the office with us? I mean, those are some concerns. We had a good conversation about the app too, like to download the app, to not download the app. We had a good conversation about that. And then also, how do we bolster trust? We've just got to keep doing it. We can't fail. Success is the best way to bolster trust, and that's really hard. There isn't an easy win or a low hanging fruit with that. But we also had a good talk. But nobody says thank you, right? Like everyone just this. And I'm not in the IT space, so I appreciate the invitation. I'm in the HR space, but no one calls the help desk and says thanks. My email's working today. I appreciate it. Or I bet there were several attacks last night. But one of our groups shared, no one appreciates it unless it breaks. So, and again, many thanks to my colleagues. I hope I've represented them.
Oh, it's nice to meet you, Laura. Yeah, that's the failure piece is really interesting because you learn by failing, or at least that's the only way I ever made it through any mathematics courses. It's a lot of time of working through problems I didn't get right till I got them right. So how does that then play into a space like this where the stakes are so high? And how do you have those conversations, especially if you want to do, let's say that we ask about some of the Trusted Learner Network initiatives and more on that to come. But let's say we're serious about giving learners more agency over their data, giving them ownership of more of it. Like that's going to take some experiment. It's going to take some figuring it out and carefully constructing as best as we understand so that we build something that doesn't have unintended consequences, because technology always does. That's not easy stuff to do. So it's kind of a high stakes game. And yet if we don't play it, we're leaving ourselves at the mercy of other players who may not be as well intentioned as we are as a university. That's a great observations. You were in room 2? All right, room 2 kind of rocked.
Yeah, and wait till we get a load of team 3, group 3, because there's a ton of people in this room. Michelle, Valerie, Christine, Stacy, Zachary, Kimberly, Lisa. Which one of you is going to represent breakout 3?
If I can guess the last names on that room was trouble.
It was a really great room to be in, and I'll take the heat though and try to share the ideas. We had great comments, and we honestly spent most of the time sharing our own personal connections to digital trust, and they were great connections. We had representation from procurement, from our legal department, and I love how this idea of right now as we're capturing health data, how one of our team members turned that into an opportunity as opposed to, it's a challenge, but also it's an opportunity to really get in front and start sharing more about that data, because it's not just that collection of daily health information that is the privacy challenge. There's also the challenge in a lot of other communication around what needs to happen so we can move forward. So we had a good conversation. And I did try to capture quite a bit of that in the comments. So.
Oh, thank you for that, Michelle. That document's not going away, right, Sam? So if somebody was so inclined and they wanted to give us their thoughts afterwards, they still could?
The Zoom meeting will end, but the document will live on forever.
Oh, I love that.
By all means, and I know we've got 12 minutes left, and I think like about 10 groups left to report as well. So shall we keep things rolling?
Yeah, let's keep rolling.
All right, awesome. Thank you, group 3. Tell us what you got. Breakout 4, Roger, Lapun, Carolee, Michelle, Christopher, Scott.
Upcoming groups, we're going to call on you. So rally together.
Yeah.
I can jump in here. I just didn't want to take the mic if someone else wanted it. But we started with digital trust stories. And I think that sort of fed us into what we think we need to see more, and more training and communication. Also, the terms of use is not a way to bolster digital trust. So how do we share the information cleanly, succinctly, with our users to build trust? And then we also talked about, it's not just trust with users to us, but it's also trust with us to our vendors, and making sure that our data is secure with them as well. Anybody else want to add anything that I missed as I tried to summarize it?
Well, I want to add this. I heard Scott's that really ring to my ear very loudly as develop that relationship. And I think the relationship building between the system and the community is very important. So like what I starting over my conversation is like, I never trust anything because I deal with data on my daily basis. And so that relationship has to be developed, and the trust is through that relationship where we can do our business much easier. So that's what I want to add.
Thank you.
Oh, I love that.
Thank you so much. We will continue rolling with group 5. That is Mel, Bonnie, Brennan, Marcella, and Pat.
And I'll jump in for us unless somebody else is dying to do so. Our group talked about a lot of different things, but one thing we wanted people something that's timely is we want people to be able to be more independent, understanding privacy and being able to navigate it, to give them basically that ownership. But that means that everybody needs better user information and understanding like what data is being collected when. And then also the interfaces, in order to be able to understand that the interfaces may need to be simpler and more open and upfront instead of having to dig through a whole bunch of different settings to be able to understand what's happening. And one thing we talked about with bolstering digital trust is because a lot of people don't read these privacy agreements, that if businesses and different things, like if we're all really more upfront about it, So that with communication in a different and maybe some different ways, like either there's a cheat sheet that kind of summarizes it, or some other way of communicating that. I mean, it's still hard to get an audience when trying to ask, like, hey, would you like to hear a more clear explanation about data privacy? It's probably a little hard sell, but those are some ideas that we were bandying around, and I see that Pat was adding some more good stuff in there too. So if anybody else has anything, feel free to share.
Melanie, I love that. And what you're describing, I think, is the opportunity ahead of us. Like, how are we going to do that? And here at ASU, why don't we do it? Why don't we figure out what those interfaces look like that you click on? Why don't we figure out what that voice is that helps you have enough information that you're comfortable with what's happening, educates you. I mean, we are a university, and what's happening, but not overwhelming and not boring and not something that's just, oh, I got to click this thing to get to the other side. Like, that's a unique challenge. And if we could figure it out, maybe we could kind of help model for others what it would look like. Like, I'm game for that, but we're gonna need you because we can't do it in a vacuum where it won't work at all.
Can I jump in? I was doing part of my research. I work in healthcare and the College of Health Solutions. And our research we were doing is my data sharing in behavioral health, that it has more privacy laws than anyone else. And we are trying to build a tool to make the patient be aware of what information they can share and what will be the granularity of that information. Because in healthcare, we have even more privacy law than anyone else. That means that we are really doing something like that in ASU, that can be expanded to all data privacy and sharing your information.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing that. And yeah, that's the space that you're working in is so critical.
Way to go, Group 6. And I hate to do it, but with 6 minutes left, I think we're going to have to force some brevity. So maybe just about a minute. And I see, thank you, Group 6, for choosing a reporter. Alicia, tell us what you came to.
Yeah, so we just talked about our own experiences and how we've just lost trust. And so I shared my own, saying that I went from having 5 social media accounts to now having none because I don't trust anything anymore, and especially anything that buys out another company is that you know that there's been data breached and that sort of stuff. In regards to the needs around data privacy, it's kind of hard to trust anything because it seems like whenever there's a new method, somebody else comes around and breaks that and saying, hey, this is the new measure, but yes, there's somebody out there that will break it. And so like, it's really hard to figure out like what those needs are because it's always moving. It's a moving target. And then another thing that in regards to ASU doing I mentioned it, but it was one of my pet peeves that even within our own system emails, we get emails from, say, our president where it looks like it's phishing. So you don't know who to trust, whether you should click on an email and that sort of stuff. So we kind of shared different experiences in regards to, but that was the general idea.
Those are such important. Every one of those ideas, I think we could have separate sessions on. It's and the phishing is getting more and more sophisticated. Trying to understand the, show me the money and tracing the money on some of these social media sites and appreciating and then trying to make decisions about the intentions that they really have. That stuff's complicated. So I really appreciate that.
Thanks so much, Group 6. Ruby, I believe you're representing Group 7.
Hey, Sam, thanks. Yes, so our question was, what are the most timely needs around data privacy? Obviously, the health data and the COVID-19 related stuff has been talked to death, I think, but definitely a concern that's very current. We also talked a little bit about Ferpa and Hipaa, and yes, there are the regulations that are out there. Ferpa was written decades ago, and a lot of it needs to be updated. And should ASU take our stance on which is more stringent than what FERPA requires? And if so, How do we publish it? How do we disseminate this information? We talked about the risk of faculty or staff, without knowing about FERPA considerations, going out and using third-party websites and services that are free with their students. And by doing so, pushing PII and FERPA information into these sites. Some of the suggestions we had were Get Protected could become a resource with easy to understand FAQs for targeted at faculty and staff who are not technologically minded to understand the risks and nuances of these rules. We also talked about the whole cookie question and how it is typically an opt-out by design, and whether it should be an opt-in by design to share your privacy whenever that option exists. Team, anything else that I missed? Anything you want to add? I think we're good.
Brilliantly covered.
Thank you, Ruby. Awesome. We're going to skip on over to breakout 9 with Allison, TJ, Katrina, and Bruce. Go, gadget speaker. Okay.
I will go ahead and do it. So one of the things we talked about in terms of bolstering digital trust, and I think it's a culture, thing that we all need to shift our attention to. So I'm in the procurement department, and we, assist with negotiations for a lot of the contracts that we bring into the university. So, shifting attention and focus to accepting fewer risks from a data privacy and information security standpoint will help put the legal protections in place and the contractual obligations that we have for vendors. So that was one of the big aspects of our conversation.
Thank you so much for that report out, Allison. Really appreciate it. I would go over to breakout group 10. I know Donna was in that group, but does anyone else want to represent?
I can represent.
Woohoo. Go for it, Rebecca.
Well, we had a very interesting conversation. We were very fortunate to have a student join us in our group, and we were able to get some perspective from his point of view. I hope he will chime in and give us additional highlights, but really it's the student data. How much data do we really need to provide that student experience? We have to have so much data to make sure we have the right educational balance as well as experience on campus. But the app came up again. It's like, okay, are we tracking people? Do we want to track people? Should we track people? So again, it really comes down to the data. How much data do we collect, and how can we maybe minimize that?
Good question.
Does anyone else from the group like to add on to that?
I think you did a great job capturing it.
Thank you.
Validation. All right, rolling through the double digits. 11, Brett, Luke, Cheryl, Michelle, Katrina, Dixon. And I know we're just at time, so hopefully we can hang on for the last just couple groups to report out and break our huddle.
I was going to volunteer Dixon, but I'll go ahead and do it. So one of my other team members asked me if I would. So, we started off kind of on how people use social media and some of the ramifications of, tagging themselves everywhere they're at, what they're eating, who they're with, et cetera. And that kind of led us into how does ASU gather data, student data, how are they using it? What are the concerns of releasing this data? How is it stored? There's a lot of questions, open-ended questions. I think what the group came to a consensus about was how transparent can we be with our students and with ASU, people in general, of what we're doing with this data and how we plan to use it, and what kind of rights do they have in regards to let's say scrubbing their data, say, hey, I don't want anybody to retain this data anymore. Dixon brought up something with Netflix where somebody asked, hey, I don't want my data stored with you guys anymore. They gave it to him in a form of JSON, was unreadable to the end user. But there's things like that, I think, that came up in our conversation were very important. I think that they're questions that are definitely going to be asked in the future.
Thank you so much for representing, Luke, for representing group 11 there.
Thanks.
Skipping 12 and on to 13, Eddie, Sean, and Scott.
Sean, where are you? You gonna let me do this all by myself?
Yeah. I'll call it if needed.
So one of the things we kind of talked about was just having more, be more collaborative and transparent. Sorry, my daughter just got home. Okay, you have to go. Can you get her, please? I'm sorry. Just be more collaborative, and I think this is a good start. And just being transparent and just trying to get on the same page and discussing things that are discussing the risks. And one of the things we talked about is just a lot of times the faculty just take the liberty to use something in class. It's free and online because it's easy and convenient. And what do we do to prevent those kind of scenarios and to inform them more about the risk and how those free services are using that student data, and they don't really give that a second thought. So that's one of the things that I kind of think about a lot, and so I'm sure other people do. So just thinking of ways to share this information so other people are aware of it, because I think probably the people in this room are the ones that think about it, and people act on things, and then we have to react and try to resolve it. So.
Yeah, and the other thing was also we were talking about we need more structured information exchange mechanisms on campus, because there's so many IT areas on campus, and the areas that are not necessarily fully IT, but they're related. And the example we had was the procurement office. We go through the procurement office to make purchases, do security reviews for applications and so on and so forth. But when it comes to determining, hey, what are the actual things like restrictions on the application? What is it that we have to follow? That still ends up coming on our IT groups to still go through those terms of use to figure that out, rather than, if there's one source that's going through this, the procurement office, them handing that information on to the different groups that, hey, these are things you have to follow with these. So.
Awesome. It feels like there needs to be a spin-off just for this conversation. Thank you so much for sharing. Group 14, I'm too parched to read all these names. Someone represent.
Kelly.
Kate.
Oh, Kelly. Where's Kelly Morris? She's still with us?
Kelly.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, I got nominated apparently. I'm voluntold. I was hoping it was going to be Kate or Mike. We kind of talked about how data can be that double-edged sword. It can be used for good or it can be used for evil, and which also leads into the trust issues of people deciding, do I want to give over my data? But the conversation also kind of went that there needs to be transparency around why we're collecting data and what it's going to be used for. And I heard some other groups say the same thing. And there's responsibility on both sides. So, if I choose to use an application, I need to understand what data I'm giving up and why. But the organization that's collecting the data needs to be transparent about that as well. So that kind of led into conversations about what we can do better at ASU is maybe helping to educate folks on why we're collecting the data, what it's going to be used for, and maybe the definition of what that particular thing means, so that they have a better understanding of, I'm giving my data up and it's going to be used for this reason, but what exactly is that reason? So it comes down to some education as well. I think that kind of summarizes, but anyone else, please jump in and fill in any gaps that you feel that we missed or that I missed.
Kelly, there's so much to think about there, and I'm really looking forward, and I see that Kim put something in the chat too that's just like, these conversations aren't easy ones. And frankly, the nature of what we might want to do with your data today may change. A lot of why the terms of services are as long as they are is they're trying to be comprehensive. They're trying to articulate to you all the things that could happen and to really make sure that they've covered their bases and disclosing that. And that's good, right? That's why the longest one there is probably the one that's the most legally correct. Absolutely. And yes, so how do we do that in such a way that we could even be respectful when the nature of that data changed? That goes into things like sunsetting data, like understanding our data lifecycle and saying, we don't need that anymore. Let's flush it. Or if we did need that again, is that data actually the data that we need? All those kinds of conversations become, you have to be really engaged to be able to have them. So thank you, Kelly, Kimberly. Like we've got our work cut out for us to figure out how to do this properly. But I love the questions that you're bringing up.
Okay, we got one last group, and I know Ruby had to depart. So Jen and Barnaby, this one's on you. Then we'll throw it back to you, Donna, for the final word as we close out.
Okay. Well, to keep it succinct and to just one phrase, what would we like to see ASU do to bolster digital trust is continue public engagement opportunities to bolster that trust within ASU and beyond.
Wow. I don't know if that's a haiku, but it sounded like one.
I know.
Thank you.
That's quite the summary from 4 paragraphs, Barnaby.
Hey, it's us and the exit. I don't want to be trampled.
Well, and it appears that you're in some kind of medical facility there, Barnaby.
Yes, this is ASU's new, beautifully designed and architected health science space up in Mayo.
Oh,
and
really?
It is a gorgeous campus, absolutely gorgeous. I invite all of you to go see it.
I've driven by it as it was being constructed. It looked really remarkable.
Yes,
so that's a teaching facility in the Mayo space.
In the Mayo space.
Wow.
And it is amazing. So Edson has access to full clinical hospital conditions. And there is so many other research environments that bring in the faculty and medical staff of Mayo, in addition to and in close collaboration with the ASU faculty and knowledge development efforts. But as we're talking about digital trust, they're walking that talk of how is it that we best honor and help foment the development of knowledge and discovery while still being cognizant of the trust that relationship means. It's an amazing space.
Well, thanks for sharing it with us.
I'll just pull on a thread too that Ruby had shared. Sorry that she couldn't share it herself, but she was really sharing from the perspective of interns in the Department of English and what that we've had a lot of discussions about the representation of various audiences, whether that be at the advisory level, or through the planning and implementation phases. But she was talking about just their ubiquitous comfort with sharing data digitally, and that paper is so very foreign to them. And then also reflected back as we talked about, what do we do as an org to bolster that digital trust? She had a very unique perspective of using faculty as a bridge to catalyze those digital trust conversations. But that's something that we could really dive in on at some point in the future. It's an interesting idea of them as catalyst.
I love that idea. Well, and I hope that that everyone's here considers this an open invitation to keep these conversations going, and an indicator of how serious we are about having all of them. Sam, did we catch all the groups?
We caught all the groups, and even better, I saw some people still taking notes in there. So don't hesitate. Don't hesitate to return to this document. I think over the next few months, you'll see probably a channel on Slack pop up for all things digital trust, and we'll be finding new ways to bring this community together, including planning the first ever ASU Digital Trust Summit, which we hope will be taking place later this spring. So stay tuned, and thank you so much.
Sam, I have the most important question of the night.
Oh, what's that?
Okay. Go for it.
Is Slido an approved app for ASU? No, just kidding.
I believe it's coming up on a security review, right, Donna? You think we might be able to push that one through at some point?
I've still got to convince Love to accept the risk, but I'm
okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for coming out. Thank you so much, Donna, for an enlightening conversation, the first of many, and everyone have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. This was great.
Thank
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Stay positive.